All right. Good morning, everybody. So good to come on. It's so good to be here with you. We're celebrating the baptism of folks and changed lives. And if you don't know me, my name's Shane. I'm part of the team here, and I get to open the Word today. And so we've been in a series called Rewritten. And the idea of this series is that you can posture your life towards despair, or you can posture your life towards surprise, hope, wonder, awe, astonishment, amazement, and anticipation of what God might do today that fundamentally takes your story off repeat and tells another story. And how much better of a life would that be? In step one, we talked about taking responsibility and refusing to blame. In step two, we talked about living with a posture that God is retelling all things, including me. Today, I want to talk to you about how to handle regret. Now, with that, everybody should kind of perk up because that's something that unites the whole room. Everybody's got regrets, right? And if you're here right now and you go, this isn't going to apply to me, I don't have regrets. Well, we don't want to know you, really. You imagine somebody going, I have nothing I regret. The quality of our life will largely come down to how well we handle our own failure. And probably more importantly, their failure. So here's what I'm going to ask you to do. I'm going to ask you to give me half an hour here, and let's cancel the white noise of our week and see what God might do here. I'm telling you that in my experience with this topic, you're going to leave here today hopefully totally free. But let's just be honest. If you leave here today 50% more free from your regrets than you did when you walked in, that's a win. Or even 10%. We'll take it. Like if we're trajectorying the right way. I have 4 goals today in half an hour. One is that you'll be equipped to handle your own regret. 2, maybe more importantly, you'll be equipped to handle their regret. Because I don't want to dive into the weeds here, but Jesus seems to intimate that the way we handle other people's failure is reciprocal to how our own emotional ability for us to feel forgiven ourselves. 3rd, and most importantly, I want to make Jesus come alive to us today in a way maybe he hasn't before. And 4th, I want us to understand the power of celebration, all in about half an hour. So how we handle regret, it's an age-old question. What do we do with our failure? Thank goodness we don't live in ancient Sumerian culture. In ancient Sumerian culture, when they thought they'd offended the gods, they would cut themselves until it rained. They lived in Iraq. Could you imagine that? In the 1500s, monks, Christian monks wrote, I prayed on my knees on stone floors until they bled. Which leads to this question, what kind of God are you picturing in your head that would take pleasure in you hurting yourself just so he could be nice? We've evolved a bit past that, I hope, but maybe not that much. The question remains, how do I know when I lay down at night that my regrets aren't weighing me down and we're not permanently being held accountable for those failures? Now, in that, I think the first question in that the first solution in the Bible might still be the best starting point. Now, as we learned Wednesday night, the Bible's not a static record of God. The Bible is a dynamic, progressive, moving revelation of how people related to God, leading to the final revelation of God in the risen Christ. And so the first answer, and I would echo Scott's sentiment, if you didn't come this last Wednesday, I would urge you to come this Wednesday. We had a good time in here. Hey, you just ask anybody that was here, and we'll continue that on. And so the first answer in the Bible on how to handle regret is here's what they did. They set aside one day a year. It was the holiest day of the year, and that day was called Yom Kippur. Don't panic about that. It just means the Day of Atonement. And it was a beautiful day. And one of the things that made this day beautiful was that God was forgiving all sins everywhere. Like everybody gets a fresh chance. Everybody gets a fresh start. Everybody gets a do-over. Everybody gets a chance to write a different story. If I could use a bucket as an illustration, we're going to put all of our regrets into one bucket. And on that day, we empty our bucket and we get to start the next year with a fresh bucket. And the idea is you can't carry this year's regrets into next year. Or next year, you'll need 2 buckets. And if you need 3, and if you don't regularly have a ritual by which we let things go, our life just gets too hard to carry. And one of the beautiful things about this day was it's the only day of the whole year where the command was Shabbat Shabbaton, absolutely no work. No one's allowed to do anything on this day. Why? Because if you let human beings do anything on a day that God is forgiving sins, at some point they'll claim it's what they did that motivated God to act, right? So can we sing on this day? No, sing, no way. No way. Why? Because if we let you sing, at some point, someone's going to say it's because we sang that God was nice. And then the question will be, how many songs? How loud are the songs? And then there'll be people who are in and people who are out. And that would just be ridiculous. Can we pray? No. Pray? No. Because if we let people pray, at some point, they're going to claim it's a prayer they prayed that motivated God to act. And then if we did that, there'll be people who prayed the prayer, there'll be people who didn't pray the prayer, people who are out, people who are in, and that would be terrible if we ever, on this day, God was acting because his faithfulness is never compromised by our lack of it. And there's no boasting. Now, that was the first answer, but it wasn't the last answer. In the Psalms, it says his mercy is new every morning. In other words, what you thought was true on Yom Kippur, what if that was true every day? Every single morning. And then Jesus comes along, which is the final and full way to see God. And he says, actually, I forgive 70 times 7 for the same sin in the same day. In other words, what's true on Yom Kippur? What if it's true every second of every minute of every hour of every day? Now, if you can't go with Jesus because that's just too nice, at least go back to forgiving yourself and others once a day. If you can't do that, at least go back to forgiving yourself and others once a week. If you can't do that, at least go back to forgiving yourself and others once a month. And if you can't do that, at least go back to forgiving yourself and others once a year. And if your concept of God is meaner than Leviticus, I would urge us to shift. If you're still holding something against yourself that's 6 years old, I would urge you to leave today freer than that. And maybe more importantly, if you're holding something against somebody else that's 8 years old, I would urge you to leave freer than that. So what I want to do is I want to take a look at this day, and I'm going to give you a very simplified version of it, hopefully to exalt the person of Jesus more than you've ever thought before. Here is the account of this day in Leviticus 16. This is verse 6. Aaron is to offer the bull for his own sin offering to make atonement for himself and his household. Then he is to take the 2 goats and present them before the Lord at the entrance to the tent of meeting. He is to cast lots for the 2 goats, one lot for the Lord and the other for the scapegoat. So next slide. This day centers around 2 goats, one goat for the Lord and the other goat for the scapegoat. This is oversimplified. Essentially, they would take 2 goats, they would cast lots for the 2 goats, and there's going to be a goat for the Lord. If you're the goat for the Lord, it's going to be a bad day for you, okay? But let's just be honest, if you're born a goat, it's already a bad day, all right? And so the goat for the Lord is going to be taken inside and sacrificed. But then the goat for the scapegoat was the goat in public. Essentially, there was a goat in private and a goat in public because people don't tend to believe things without seeing it. Oh, by the way, just a 10-second Bible nerd aside here. That's exactly how the New Testament writers framed Jesus, that everything he did was true before the foundation of the world, but in these last days was made manifest so we could see it. This is Yom Kippur sort of language, that Jesus didn't inaugurate a new reality. He just simply showed us what God was always like from before the foundation of the world. That's a beautiful sort of way to say it. So there's a goat for the Lord, and then there's a public goat that gets translated in English, the scapegoat. But it's a weird word in Hebrew. The word is Azazel. Now, this is the most important word I'm going to teach you today, so I'm going to take a risk here. And with some Ravens, I guess, gusto, I want us to try to say that word. It just sounds like this. Azazel. Let's try that. Ready, go. Azazel. Okay, good. So let's raise our energy 20% and try that again. Ready, go. Azazel. So this day centered around 2 goats. One goat for the Lord. And the other goat, what was his name? Everybody together? Azazel. Now, Azazel means take him away. So in other words, whatever's weighing you down, we're going to remove it. We're going to take it away. It can also mean a weapon in the hand of the enemy. In other words, whatever the enemy's using to beat you up, normally your own failure, we're going to take it out of his hand. We're going to remove that. This is such a powerful metaphor. Azazel has lived on in several different mythologies. Even today, if you're a Marvel comic fan, if you're like the X-Men, you know the X-Men? There's an X-Men named Azazel, spelled the same way. And his power is, if he can touch you, he can remove you. He can take you away. So the idea is whatever is weighing you down, we're going to take him away. Let's keep going. Aaron shall bring the goat, whose lot falls to the Lord. Next slide. And sacrifice it for a sin offering. But the goat chosen by Lot as the Azazel shall be presented alive before the Lord, to be used for making atonement by sending it away into the desert as the Azazel. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk through a very simplified version of this ceremony with the goal of exalting Christ. I want to show you how the gospel writers, particularly Matthew, who's writing to a Jewish audience, used a Yom Kippur ceremony to define the meaning of Jesus. So first, the goat for the Lord. The goat for the Lord would be taken, next slide, would be taken down and tied to the altar. And so they would take this goat, tie him to the altar, and the first thing he would do, the priest, is he would lay hands on the goat, malah. He would lay hands on the goat. And the idea is I have the power and the authority to impart all the regret of Israel onto this goat. So everybody bring your bucket. Everybody got your bucket of regret? We're going to put it on this goat. Now, the Talmud says that the priest was under so much pressure when he put the sins of Israel onto this goat that he had to turn his head. So the symbolism is this. Hold on a second. The gospel writers say that when God put the sins of the whole world onto Jesus, he had to turn his head. This is Yom Kippur. It's like, to a Jewish audience, that would be like, is this the day God just lets it all go? Are we watching the living embodiment of the day we all get a fresh start, a second chance, a clean slate, and an opportunity to write a better story? The next part of the ceremony was called the press. The priest would lay on the goat and squeeze. I think the idea was we really got to get the sins in the goat. And he would squeeze. But the play on words is, the word press is Gethsemane. Hold on a second. The gospel writers say that Jesus went to the Garden of Gethsemane. And remember his prayer? He said, Father, I'm pressed with the sins of the whole world. This is Yom Kippur language. It's like, is this the day God just lets it all go? The next part of the ceremony was, it is finished. At exactly the 9th hour, the priest would proclaim in a loud voice, it is finished. At exactly the 9th hour, Jesus proclaimed in a loud voice, it is finished. Again, is this the day God just lets it all go? Is this the day we all get a fresh start, a second chance, a clean slate, and an opportunity to write a better story? The next part of the ceremony was called Don't Touch Me. Essentially, the priest would cut the goat's throat. He would catch the goat's blood in this cone-shaped cylinder, broad at the top, narrow at the bottom, and he'd swirl it. The reason is they believed back then that the blood had to be alive for it to be viable. And the way to keep blood alive is to keep it moving. That was the idea. And he would swirl it, and he would walk from the altar to the Holy of Holies saying, don't touch me, I have not yet offered the blood of the sacrifice. Don't touch me, I have not yet offered the blood of the sacrifice. But hold on, the gospel writers say after all these things, Jesus met 2 women in a garden, and he doesn't even say hello. What does he say? Don't touch me, don't touch me. This is all Yom Kippur language. It's like Matthew is going, if you want to know what God is actually like, think about Yom Kippur and think about that being true every second of every minute of every day. The priest would then go into the Holy of Holies, and he would sprinkle blood on the altar 7 times. That's a different message for a different day. Sprinkle blood on the altar 7 times. All I want you to know for right now is he was a bloody mess. He's just cut an animal's throat. He's all bloody. And here's what they believed, right? They were superstitious. Here's what they believed. If I said God just forgave all sins, your reasonable question would be, how do we know it worked? Well, here's how they knew it worked. Here's what they thought. If it worked, that man survived. If it didn't work, he died. So they're tying ropes to him to pull him out just in case. This guy's under a lot of pressure, right? And he would come out and he would have to prove he lived through it. Now remember, they were superstitious back then. They believed in ghosts and things like this, right? And so he had to prove that he lived with flesh. He would have to wash his hands and present his hands for inspection. Like, hey, I made it. I'm not a ghost. Remember the gospel writers say that after all these things, Jesus appeared to his disciples in the upper room, and what did he do? He presented his hands for inspection. And remember they said they were terrified, thinking they had seen a ghost. And he's like, come on, you could touch my hands. And they're like, we're not touching you, bro. No, man. Like, what? And he's like, well, I got to prove I lived through this. So if you're not going to touch my hands, give me some food and I'll eat it and I'll prove it doesn't just fall through. It's me. I'm not a ghost. This is Yom Kippur language. It's like, is this the day God just lets it all go? But this day doesn't just center around one goat. It centers around 2 goats. The first goat was for the Lord. And the second goat, what was his name? Everybody together with some gusto. Azazel. And Azazel means take him away. Here's the account for Azazel. Next slide. This just keeps going in Leviticus 16. When Aaron is finished making atonement for the most holy place, the tent of meeting and the altar, he shall then bring forward the live goat. That's Azazel. He is to lay both hands on the head of the live goat and confess over it all the wickedness and rebellion of the Israelites. All their sins. Pause. The word all there is actually all. And let's quit making mental hula hoops to make all not mean all, because if we make all not mean all, we run the risk of us being the exception to all. But what if there's no exceptions to all, because all means all and it says all, and let's leave all, right? Because when we do mental hula hoops to somehow make all not mean all, one day we run the risk of us being the exception to all. And the cure for that is to quit doing mental hula hoops and making exceptions to all, because all means all and let's leave it all, right? But Shane, he's a drug addict. I know. All. And there's no such thing as a drug addict that's loving life at 55. And we want that drug addict to change his life. At Central, we want that man, we want his story to be rewritten. And the thing we don't want in the way of that is living every day in despair and condemnation as if he's already done so much damage, God can't redeem his story. Because all means all. But Shane, he left his wife for another woman. I know. There's a lot of pain in that too. And we don't condone that. But at the same time, that was 5 years ago. And we want that man to rewrite his life and not just continue that kind of destructive behavior on repeat. We don't affirm that behavior, but at the same time, the thing we don't want getting in the way of that man changing his life is the feeling of condemnation and despair, like there's no hope for him. All means all. And put them on the goat's head. We'll talk about that in a second. He shall then send the goat away into the desert in the care of a man appointed to the task. The goat will carry on itself, next slide, all their sins to a solitary place, and the man shall release it into the desert. The man who releases the goat as the Azazel must wash his clothes and bathe himself with water. Afterwards, he may come into the camp. So first was the goat for the Lord. The second was the goat for Azazel. Let's walk through that. So essentially, they would take this terrified goat. He's standing in front of everybody. He knows what just happened to his friend inside. He's not happy about it, right? And he's standing there, and they would say, "Behold, Israel, your sin." And they would lay hands on the head of this goat. Everybody got your bucket? Everybody got your regrets? We're going to place it on this goat. You don't have to carry it one more day. We're going to put it on the head of this goat. And they would attach it to the goat's head. The way they would do that is a scarlet woolen thread, like a red cord. And they would wrap the goat's head with this red cord, and then the priest would step back and say, "Behold, Israel, your sin." Pause. Pilate, as a part of Jesus' trial, stood Jesus in front of the Jewish crowd and wrapped his head with thorns. Hold on. If you wrap someone's head with thorns, what color would the wrapping be? Red. This is all Yom Kippur imagery. They would then walk the goat through the crowd, and they walked him through the crowd. They would take a rope and they would just walk him through the crowd. And the priest would say, "Behold, Israel, your sin is being removed from you as far as the east is from the west. Behold, Israel, your sin is being removed from you as far as the east is from the west." He would then hand the goat into the care of a man appointed to the task. Remember, Jesus said to Pilate, "You've been given charge over me by heaven." Somebody had to be put in charge of the Azazel. And the guy would release the goat into the desert. I was in Jerusalem once with Pastor Terry, and I saw where this would have happened, and it would have just taken a while. Like, this is where Yom Kippur gets very awkward. It takes a long time to release a goat into the desert, and you're not allowed to do anything. You imagine a group of people don't thrive in forced silence. Like if I was to say, "Okay, let's take the next minute and be utterly quiet in here." Never try that in a Pentecostal church. 8 seconds into that, somebody's going to go, "Wah!" And people say, "Oh, the Spirit's moving." No, it's just we don't like silence. And so you're kind of waiting for the goat to go, and you're kind of, "Stop belting." It's work. Ah! No whistling, no talking, no singing. Just took a while. And so what they started doing was they just started throwing the goat off the closest cliff. The reason is it's more expedient. And there was one great scene in the Mishnah that talked about there was one Yom Kippur that 4 days after the goat had been released, he found his way back home. And so everybody's sins returned. Like this goat came back with everybody's regrets. Pause. By the way, that made its way into English metaphors. Like think about it when you were a kid. If you did something stupid, and your friends are making fun of you, what did your grandmother tell you? "Hey, don't let them get your goat," right? To get someone's goat is to bring up their failure in a way that embarrasses them. Pause. The Church of Jesus Christ had better be a culture of goat removers and never goat bringers. Because here's what happens. When people come into this place, here's the question they're asking, and they don't even know how to ask it. They're asking this: how much of my story do I have to hide for this group of people to accept me? Is this a place that I could get a fresh start, a second chance, a clean slate, a rewritten story? Is this that kind of place? Or how much of me do I have to hide for this group of people to accept me? Are they going to be bringing up my goat? And the Church of Jesus Christ had better be goat removers and never goat bringers. And we need to stop. We need to stop giving people cliques who make their living just bringing up people's failures, right? Like, seriously, like you don't want to be the one bringing the goat. You want to be the one removing the goat. So the next time someone brings up your failure, particularly if it's over a year old, just look around and go, I just don't see my goat anywhere. See what they do. And again, you had to ask, how do we know this worked? Well, the inside goat, you know it worked if the guy lived. The outside goat, you know it worked if a miracle happened. So the Talmud talks about a miracle happening every year on this day. They would cut a piece of that red cord and hang it from the temple door. And when the goat was fully removed, that cord would turn white. It's mentioned in the Bible, in Isaiah, come now, let us reason together. Though your sins are like scarlet, they'll be made white as snow. This is Yom Kippur language. This is like, oh, is this the day? Now, could you imagine with me? Can you imagine being in this crowd of thousands of people and you're the first one to witness that cord turn white? There would be a buzz. You've been in a stadium before when something happens and you can hear it. There's a vibration that goes on. Here's the problem. You're not allowed to do anything. So you got all this pent up energy and you're not allowed to do anything. But you can't do anything until Yom Kippur ends. And Yom Kippur ends when the priest notices that cord turn white. And when he notices the cord turn white, there was a chair up in front of everybody. And Yom Kippur ends with a very simple move. The priest would back up to the chair and he would simply sit down. And when the priest sat down, it was the indication to the people that everything had been accomplished. Nothing else needs to be done. Everybody gets a clean slate, a fresh start, a second chance, an opportunity to write a better story. Everybody gets an empty bucket. And at that point, they were allowed to do something. And I don't even know the Hebrew word for this, but they went nuts. Like they would sing and jump and shout and blow horns and clap. And it wasn't, here's what's important. It wasn't celebration to get God to act. That's witchcraft. Worship to get God to act is witchcraft. Worship as a celebration of what he's already done, that is worship. And they would celebrate. And the corporate celebration, for this is true for me and you. You can't want mercy for yourself and just judgment for everybody else. That corporate celebration, that corporate agreement, people left freer. Now, I want to pause here and talk to you about Jesus for a second. I want to talk to you about particularly the Passion story, the Easter story. And we've learned this since we were little kids, right? If you weren't a little kid in church, you still would probably know something about this. So Jesus is on trial with Pilate. And Pilate's in a conundrum. He doesn't want to hurt Jesus at all. He doesn't think he's guilty, but he doesn't want a riot because a riot would offend Caesar, and that's worse for Pilate. And so Pilate absolves himself from responsibility. And he says, I'll do whatever you want me to do. And he places him in front of the Jewish crowd with red wrapping around his head. And he says, you tell me, what do you want me to do? And the crowd start chanting something famous. It's in every play, every movie, all the demonstrations, the flannel graph, if you're of a certain age. They all start chanting something, everybody together. What did they start saying? Crucify him, crucify him, crucify him. Here's the problem. That's not what they said. Check this out. This is John 19. Next slide. It was the day of preparation for Passover week, about the 6th hour. Here's your king, Pilate said to the Jews. But they shouted, next slide, but they shouted, take him away, crucify him. Hold on. If a Jewish crowd is saying, take him away, what word would they be saying? Azazel, Azazel. Is this the day God just lets it all go? But hold on a second. In Leviticus, it says someone has to be put in charge of the Azazel. And after he's done, he has to wash his hands. Next slide. This is Matthew. When Pilate had saw that he was getting nowhere, but instead an uproar was starting, he took water and he washed his hands in front of the crowd. Is this the day God just lets it all go? But hold on, Yom Kippur ends when the priest sits. Here's the writer of Hebrews. Next slide. Day after day, every priest stands and performs his religious duties. Again and again, he offers the same sacrifices, which can never take away sin. But when this priest has offered for all time one sacrifice for sins, he is now sat down at the right hand of God. Which leads me to this question. Have we ever presented the gospel in such a way that makes Jesus stand back up? Like, we know you did it all, but we just need everybody to do it our way because it makes us feel better. Like, or there's this guy named John, and he's writing about his experiences with Yom Kippur, and he's using Yom Kippur language here. Next slide. Dear children, I write this to you so that you will not sin. Pause. The only appropriate response to God's grace is to choose to live better. If you get an empty bucket, don't show up every year with the same exact bucket of regrets. Will God be faithful to forgive you? Yes, but the quality of your life's at play. At this time of year, this was the time that they would be sowing seeds in fields. And the idea is what's true of your freshly plowed field is true of your heart. And if you sow the same exact seeds, next June, you're going to get the same exact harvest. Don't do that. The same exact harvest of anger gets you bitterness. The same exact harvest of doubt gets you cynicism. Don't do that. If you get a fresh start, write a better story. Sow different seeds. If you fail a test and the teacher gives you a do-over, write different answers. If you commit a crime and a clever lawyer gets you off, stop breaking the law. If you hit a bad golf shot and your partner says, take another one, aim different, right? Like, do something with the grace of God. Is his faithfulness ever compromised by our lack of it? No, but the quality of your life's at play. It's a story about whether your life will be rewritten or by your own choice, you'll get the same exact harvest every year. Dear children, I write this to you so that you will not sin. But watch his next line. But if anybody does sin, I love that. Dear children, I hope you don't. But if you do, Jesus is still going to defend you before the Father. Jesus Christ, that his faithfulness is never compromised by our lack of it. He is the, next slide, he is the atoning sacrifice for our sins. There's that Yom Kippur word. And not just for ours, but for the sins of the whole world. Everybody, everywhere. So how can we remember today? I think we could remember, they say good teachers can summarize big topics in one sentence. I'm going to take 4, and I'm going to call my musician friends back up on the stage because I want us to do something together. Here's a great way to think of today. Next slide. The hands have been washed. But Shane, I committed a crime. I know. I'm so sorry you did that, and I'm so sorry you went through that. And I'm sure prison was terrible, and you paid your price, and now you're out. And you know what? You're at this church, and here's your question. Can I have my story rewritten here? And if you're ready to rewrite that story, the people at Central are willing to celebrate that with you and go every step of the way with you. Because the good news is better than that failure. The good news is the hands have been washed, even for that. Or maybe we can say it this way. Next slide. The cord has turned white. You say, but Shane, it's an addiction. It's pornography. I know, dear children, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry that someone introduced you to that when you were 12 and then it became an addiction in your life, and it's played havoc on your relationships because learning to objectify people harms everything. When we don't honor the image bearer, but we objectify people, that harms everything. But if you're ready to rewrite your story, the thing we don't want to get in the way of that is you feeling condemned and despair, like I may as well just ruin my life. No, the good news is better than that failure. The cord has turned white. Maybe we can say it this way. The priest has sat down. It's like, Shane, you don't understand, man. It's like, I had an affair. I know, dear children. I can't imagine what that would have felt like. I'm so sorry you went through that. Like you hurt everybody around you. And it was definitely your fault. Definitely. And you're taking responsibility for that. Like laying in bed at night trying to remember if you erased all your texts. That would have been a horrible way to live. But the good news is better than that. We don't want you that on repeat for you. We hope you don't, but Jesus' faithfulness was never compromised by your lack of it. And if you're really ready to rewrite that story, the good news is better than that. That priest is sitting down. Or maybe we could just think of it one last way. Next slide. The goat has left the building. Azazel has left the building. You say, Shane, but I went through a divorce. I know that's so much pain, but it was my fault. I know it was your fault. It was definitely your fault. I know the story, but the good news is better than that failure. Whether it's the crime or the addiction or the gossip or the slander or the gluttony or the divorce or the affair or the disillusion of things, the loss of business, whatever it is, the good news is better than your failure. The good news is your goat has left the building. Now, I thought long and hard about how to end today. There's two ways to do it. One way is to have an altar call and say, if you want to leave your regrets up here at this altar, I want you to come up here. We're going to have the team pray for you. We're going to leave it up here. There's nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that. I just frankly don't want to deal with all the snot and tears and all that entails. Plus, we'd have a hard time switching the services out. Plus it violates the spirit of Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur ends with violent celebration. Violent celebration. No, please don't leave yet, because you can't tell a room with white people in it to go nuts, okay? White people don't know what that means. We're like, go nuts, okay. We don't know what that is, right? And so, we've all been in those church services where it's awkward. They're like, everybody shout, and it's like, we're not gonna do that, okay? Here's the thing that every culture, no matter where you are in the world, will feel comfortable doing this. And it's clapping on beat, okay? And let me explain clapping for a second. There's a way you can clap mindlessly, but clapping is corporate agreement. This is why when there's sports, you high five when hands come together, or you make a handshake agreement. When hands come together, there's a corporate agreement. And here's what's gonna happen. When we agree together corporately that this is true for me and you, there's gonna be a freedom released in this place. So would you stand with me? And I wanna proclaim something over you. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to pay attention to the space just above your stomach and below your heart, right here. This is where we carry regret and grief and pain. It's more in your top of your gut than it is in your heart. It's just right here. And I want you to pay attention to what's gonna happen to that space. I want you to become aware of the regret that still is the loudest voice at night when you go to bed. You don't want the loudest voice at night when you go to bed to be your own regret, and you definitely don't want it to be the voice of the one you can't forgive. And so I want that to release. And here's what's gonna happen. When we do this together, the shame, the pain, the guilt, the divorce, the affair, the adultery, the gossip, the slander, the gluttony, the lack of fiscal responsibility, whatever that thing is, you don't have to carry it one more day, because the good news is better than that. The good news is your goat has left the building. So, Mr. Drummer, give me that beat we talked about. Here we go, like this. Today, to leave with a revelation deep in your soul that the hands have been washed, the cord has turned white, the priest has most definitely sat down, and more than anything at all, may each and every one of you leave knowing your goat has left the building. Praise